As you know, this is the Fireside Chat, and it is going to be more of the discussions with our panel member. But before we will hit there, let me introduce myself. This is Sushil Madhukar, and I am your host today and hosting these distinguished panel members who are leading name and dealing with a lot of identity-related solutions and problems across either you look into the identity at authentication, governance, as well as the enough representation from the end user who belongs to the financial industry, which is the most regulated industry. So just to introduce our panel member, if everyone is here, we have Aubrey Turner, who is Executive Advisor at Ping Identity, a very known name into the thought leadership. Brent McCormick, Senior Solution Advisor at SailPoint, a leading IGA product. Roozbeh Taheri-Nia, he is the director at IM program at CPPIB. And we have Yash S, who is manager at IM program at Toronto Stock Exchange. Before we will go into the discussions, some of the disclaimers to make sure that everything is taken care of. So everyone, just to make sure this session is under recording now already. And that recording is going to be used only for the knowledge sharing, not onto the different users. Just to make sure that we have the end user, our representative from the different organization, their views, ideas, and thoughts from all the panel members here are their own and not associated with their employers or the organizations, either into the current, future, or the past relations. Any data shared during discussions are for the reference, and the sources can be provided if you need based on your request. All the public informations which are available will be discussed and will be shared. Any private and controlled data will not be discussed and shared during discussions. LinkedIn connects are available. These discussions are also live at the LinkedIn. If you want to reach out, connect to the panel member for the future course. Again, just to make sure this is not a paid program, the purpose of this fireside chat to get experience and the knowledge from all the members. Keep sharing your questions for panel members during Q&A, and as much as I will be able to accommodate those questions during the discussions, or we already have 10 minutes of time for the Q&A. Having said, let's jump into the discussion. Just to let you know that TechDemocracy, along with our partners SailPoint and Ping, we did a lot of polling before coming onto this discussion, and all the regulated end users or the members or the attendee had the choice to discuss about their strategy, compliance, zero trust, automation, and implementation within the identity. And this identity, if we are talking about, we are not limiting in any specific domain. And that is where we are going to discuss around. Before I will ask the first questions to my panel member, I just wanted to give some baseline that as of a state of security report by one of the leading identity product company, it has been given that financial services, which is the most regulated industry, are twice as likely to be attacked in 2023, and future is the same. As of leading research analyst, 72% of the healthcare organizations are still required more focused investment within the identity to mature their cybersecurity roadmap. As of 2023 July, which is very recent, 1 out of 3, I mean, if you look 1/3, breaches reported so far are related somewhere to the identity security or identity related breaches. Considering that, I just wanted to start with our strategy perspective, and Aubrey, feel free to add up more on your introduction, which is not new. From your perspective, how has the prioritization of identity security evolved on the CISO roadmap in recent years?
Yeah, great question to lead us off with. And, just some additional thoughts around who I am. Again, Aubrey Turner, Executive Advisor of Ping Identity, about 20 years in the cyber and identity space. Great to be here with my fellow panelists. Such a relevant topic. Sushil, to get right to your question, I can't say, so I'll only generalize. I don't have any numbers in front of me, but I've got to believe, right? If you look at the last 10 years, identity has got to be somewhere in the top 3, top 5 from a CISO, importance, right? And I think it's risen. I remember, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, talking about, whether CISOs owned and controlled identity. And at that time, I think the numbers were, a lot less. If you, polled some CISOs and whether, they had responsibility for identity or not, some of that, relative to infrastructure and, Active Directory and who owned that. And if you look at the last 10 years, probably some of the factors that have, driven CISOs to own the identity roadmap here more recently, it's remote work, it's cloud, the network is the internet. So all these kind of trends that have, kind of really pushed that onto the CISO's radar. Identity is now, it can't be an afterthought, right? I think identity was kind of like the redheaded stepchild of, cybersecurity disciplines for many years. And because identity is now under attack, it is, and to the numbers that you cited in financial services, it's mission critical, right? And the CISO's role and their value in terms of protecting and securing the organization. A year ago, I was talking to some CISOs, and CISOs certainly, humans, right? Of course, we all are, and think of themselves in different ways. But this one particular CISO just had some really good insights around, his role as really protecting the revenue and reputation of the organization. Certainly, that's the CRO's job, is to, drive revenue, but protecting that in terms of making sure there aren't incidents and breaches, as a CISO. And, that particular CISO's thought is, I'm a business leader whose responsibility and area of focus happens to be cybersecurity. So I think the CISO's mindset, their perspective, and again, because of the things that have just driven that, and even if you think about the OWASP top 10 as another maybe data point, there are, I think, 3 or 4 of those, the OWASP top 10, and the evolution of that list are identity-related vulnerabilities or needs, right? So all of these things kind of come together, and certainly identity security, got to be a top 3, top 5 item on any CISO's roadmap for all those reasons. So, but I certainly welcome, any further perspective on that. One last thought. I think you can even look at who the CISOs report to today as another data point, by the way, in terms of the importance of the role and how identity and identity-related breaches have kind of driven that, and certainly who CISOs, now report to: legal, board of directors, et cetera, et cetera. So I think some of that has changed as well. I'll end it there and kick it over to whoever else has some thoughts on that.
No, thank you, Aubrey. Definitely, right. The role and the importance and the prominence, right, of the CISO org, and primarily looking at the identity as a perimeter of any of the cybersecurity roadmap if they are building up, is very critical. Roozbeh, how do you see from the organizations, right, which you have seen or you have been dealing with, and how your roadmap getting prominence under the CISOs?
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation. Thank you, Aubrey. My name is Roozbeh. I'm, as Sushil mentioned, Director of Identity Program at CPP Investments. I've been in the identity space for about 19 years now. I'm aging myself. Vast majority of that as a consultant in identity space. I can tell you that as the role of the CISO has grown in prominence within organizations, we also observe that the identity function has now firmly established under a CISO. It wasn't always like that at the beginning of the journey. And as a function of the fact that there are established facts and realization that identity is a lion's share of threat surface when it comes to breaches and attacks, identity has grown under the portfolio of the CISO quite a bit. One observation I have is that in a lot of organizations, from budgeting perspective, and that's just one indicator among others, from a budgeting perspective, it's not uncommon to see 50% of a CISO's budget being allocated to identity. And also from a reporting perspective, again, not uncommon to see as CISOs report up the chain into the board, identity now features prominently on the cybersecurity reports back to the boards. So I think that's a good indication of how important it's become. Identity has become in a CISO's portfolio.
Oh, that's a good insight. Bringing in Brent.
Can I add to just this question? I think I've got some, I have mentors that, so unfortunately I'm going to age myself too. So over 30 years in this industry, which is exciting because it's been a fun industry. It's been a fun ride, but I've been with SailPoint now for 6 years, but helping customers all along the way. I've been pretty much that my career has been customer facing. One of my favorite security practitioners out there is a guy named Kevin Mandia. And his quote that I want to share with you is to CISOs and the C-level suite is prevention fails. So no matter what we do to stop the first inning of the kill chain, no matter what we do, sooner or later, there's going to be a crack in our defenses. And the only thing on the other side when prevention fails is to diminish the impact of these breaches is identity security. So that speaks volumes. Now it's a matter of, well, how can we get our identity security program running and working? And there's so many different levels of sophistication. Certainly finance industry is probably one of the strongest industries out there, but you see organizations like Caesars and MGM being attacked successfully. That tells you that, it does. It's true. What Kevin is saying is it is true. The attacks are getting more and more sophisticated, and social engineering and the types of attacks being used. One of the biggest ones he mentioned was SIM swapping. And so that's tying in very tightly now to prevention of fraud with people saying they are who they are, right? So a phone call now requires video conversations with holding up your ID saying, yeah, look, this is me. The picture is older, but this is me and I am who I say I am, because those kind of attacks are leading to the SIM swapping, people impersonating other people and getting through help desks, getting through phone companies and, calling help desk saying, hey, I've got a new phone, just the i15 came out, I'm going to swap over. So I think it's gotten to that point where board level is definitely on the table for them. But, we still have some very, very immature organizations that it hasn't risen to that level. But I think that goes a long way to just say, the potential to get it, the attention and the budget, the funding is all there. There's enough information out there for this to rise to the right level. So hopefully that kind of maybe sets the stage too for why it's such a concern for CISOs, or should be.
Yeah, no, that fairly, summarized, Brent. Just to add up the similar view, right, and adding another perspective of the same questions, right? SailPoint being the leader within identity globally, they are dealing and helping different organizations, right, across the board, irrespective of the verticals and the businesses. What is your perspective? What do you see from the customer? How does identity security fit into their broader picture, right? Again, it's related to the questions Aubrey, Roozbeh, and users inside, that if the cybersecurity transformation initiative starts within their organization, what are the share, I will say, of the identity security fitment comes within that transformation initiatives?
I think that, a look inward when you're looking at how does it fit in, it needs to be funded. And believe it or not, we see a lot of times that, the governance team or an IAM team or, security team are separate teams working in different silos, and they're not collectively working together. And I think that's a very common problem I've seen over my years, where some groups are just heads down doing what they do, and other teams are doing what they do. And, they're not coming together and really strategizing as an organization to have a more collective strategy. And so I think that's just kind of some of the broader problems, because cybersecurity is such a broad range of things that can be done, and teams that are looking at that. So there's a lot of things that you can do to look for how to respond. But, I think that's probably one of the biggest areas that I see, is that, you need to look for ways and how the organization is functioning. And so a lot of times having someone come from the outside who can assess and help you understand that broader picture on how you're functioning, maybe where you have some dysfunction, is probably a good approach. And organizations like TechDemocracy can come in and help with those kinds of discussions, roadmaps, and assessments, as an example.
Awesome. No, thanks, Ben. Yes, you have seen a lot within the financial domain, dealing with the identity, either it's a governance side or authentication or privilege. What are the changes you have seen in last 5 years towards the identity security as a fitment into the overall cybersecurity roadmap for the organization?
First of all, thank you, Sushil, for having me as a panelist. Great discussion topics. In my view, if we talk about any cybersecurity transformation, what I've seen many times, organizations, as the other panelist mentioned, focus on what they need to do from their own piece, and there's not a lot of collaboration effort. Teams are working in silos, and they do exactly what their day-to-day is, but on the bigger picture, they not a lot of times they put a focus on. What I've seen is collaboration is very important. And whenever there is a new initiative, either it's a part of the acquisitions, many times we see acquisitions coming in, and the company which is acquired have a different mindset on security and the way they have been doing things, and now it's your job to get them up to the standards based on your regulations and requirement. Having the assessment done is very important, so you know what is the baseline where you need to start. From there, you kind of build up on top of the improved, mature position in that business or in that program, but also having that awareness in mind across the teams, where identity is not a point in time effort. It is something which you have to maintain and nurture as a continuous improvement. One of the big piece we see a lot of times is the identity lifecycle or the governance lifecycle, the IGA program. If there has no or not much important in the organization, where some DevOps or some application team requested credentials, and then those are created and plugged into the application. If you're not maintaining those credentials over time for governance, if you still need it, if the passwords are getting rotated, if those credentials are well protected, you kind of lose track of those important factors in the identity side. In my opinion, those are as important, if not more important, than the other things which we do on an annual basis. Certifications and the general governance around our applications, BCP exercises. We need to pay attention to making sure the identity itself within those ecosystems is also governed properly and maintained well. That's what I would say.
Okay, no, that's fair. The key, once we were doing the polling, that what people wants to hear from our panelists and having the discussion. The second point was more prominence was the zero trust. Again, the question around that zero trust is gaining the prominence across the board. Either look at the product side, or if you are building your cybersecurity transformation roadmap, the focus is that how you will achieve or you will go near to the zero trust within the organization, right? It is again for all those esteemed panelists here, and Aubrey and Roozbeh, if you want to start. And how do you see that organizations should implement a zero trust approach in identity security? Because zero trust, it's a big name. I don't want to go in discussion of the zero trust altogether. But if we look into the identity security, how the organization should approach to have the zero trust implementation for a specific area of the identity once they look into.
Yeah, can I, I'll kick us off here. You know, I feel like zero trust has already gained prominence. It already is prominent. Now, does that prominence translate into success? I think that remains to be seen. I think I could even make an argument that it's, I don't want to say jump the shark, but it's on the other side in some cases. I think, you know, kind of, let's remember this, right? Zero trust is not new. It's been around for, I think, a decade plus, 12 years, you know, and Brent was talking about his 30 years of experience. I didn't know if that was human years or dog years. Sometimes it feels like dog years, right, Brent? But, you know, like we've already moved on to talking about, you know, continuous adaptive trust. There's terms like cybersecurity mesh and, you know, identity orchestration. So all these other things that kind of, you know, maybe kind of fill the gap with some folks, some CISOs, right, that may be frustrated or, you know, with all the buzz around zero trust. And a lot of it was just ignited and fueled by, you know, the lockdown and the pandemic and all that stuff. I will say this, I think zero trust is identity centric. This doesn't diminish the other cybersecurity disciplines. And I've said this, you know, 1,000 times, and I'll say it 1,000 more. Zero trust is identity centric, but it is a team sport. If you believe in the principle of least privilege, which is tied to zero trust, I don't know how you get there without identity, right? I've said that again, and I'll continue to say it till I'm blue in the face. But in terms of getting started, right, and we've seen CISOs and other security leaders be frustrated, right? There's all this buzz, all this energy, and then it's like, okay, well, what do I do first, right? What do I get started? So certainly I think, you know, getting buy-in from leadership, right? There's a cost and investment that needs to be made in zero trust, you know, and going to, you know, the executive leadership team, the board, to get that funding to make the case for zero trust. I think that's, you know, been one of the challenges. You're going to have pushback. You're going to change how things work. And, you know, people are always uncomfortable with change, although in many cases it's the change in behavior is more healthy, but there's always pushback. So you've got to have really good organizational change management to go along with zero trust. In my experience, we've talked about zero trust, and it's been so we've got to evolve the security posture. We've got to evolve the security posture. What about evolving the user experience? And I think that's been one of the missing ingredients, right? As we move to zero trust, and you can pick a use case like secure contractor, right? And find that that's the place that you want to start. Well, how do you know, you're improving, you know, you're improving security, the security posture, but are you also improving the user experience? And I think that's part of the rationalization of, you know, where to start and bringing in that change management. You know, I think we saw in one of the postmortems of one of the recent breaches that, you know, made the headlines, you know, there's really that kind of a zero trust model that never trust, always verify. This wasn't explicitly stated in the after action report or postmortem, but, you know, a control failed, but another one, you know, is part of that zero trust framework, that, you know, integration, the orchestration of all these different things coming together, that team sport, right, was able to detect and prevent a deeper breach. And I couldn't agree more with I'm glad Brent brought up the point about Kevin Mandia and his quote that is so relevant more than ever today with identity being under attack. So I think those are some of the challenges. I kind of try to touch on some of the solutions. I think picking a use case is fundamental. And so kind of being able to pick your spots, so to speak, have some initial success and build on that. And then you can go back to the board and ask for additional funding for additional things. So those were kind of my initial thoughts on implementing zero trust and being identity centric with regards to that and some of the challenges. Love to hear what my fellow panelists, have seen or thoughts that they have around this idea as well.
Sure. No, you cannot boil the ocean.
Right. You try.
If I may on this topic, so I 100% agree with what Aubrey mentioned. Couple of key points, and I think it was implied in what Aubrey said, is around establishing expectations when it comes to zero trust and having a realistic approach as you devise your roadmap. And what I mean by that is, first of all, the expectation needs to be set that zero trust is not a product, it's a mindset that develops into a framework. Obviously, there's technology involved to make it happen, but more so than anything, it's a mindset. And also, absolutely agree that zero trust has been there for a very long time for us security professionals. But as we go out and we have to work with technology and with business, the realization that it is new for them and helping them understand, it is a framework, it is a mindset, and approaching it in a incremental approach, in an incremental way, meaning that let's not go with a big bang and go after your entire network, after your entire application portfolio, but being selective and being methodical about it and step by step. So identifying certain application or segments that you want to implement zero trust in there and building on that, developing value. And also, yet to be seen, I think more successful implementations of this type of framework is where expectation is that we're not going to make everything zero trust in our environment and our ecosystem. We're going to go and apply this to absolutely critical things that we need to do that to.
Yeah, well said, Roozbeh. Brent?
Yeah, thank you. I definitely have an opinion on this one. So one of the things I think the mindset needs to change here also is that zero trust is great. It gives you guidance, it gives you direction. You've got a North Star to aim toward. But I think a lot of organizations need to also think about not just being defensive. They need to be offensive. They need to have their own teams that are attacking them and simulating those attacks. That's going to give them that feedback is their program working? What is this team coming in and attacking them able to accomplish? And that can be done very strategically, right? You can help that team with making certain assumptions of where they can begin from, and that's a true test of, is it really working or not working? And I think that mindset can be really helpful for organizations, and it's typically completely different from how most organizations think. Most organizations are all on the defense, right?
No, it is, right? I mean, you cannot be on defensive side and you can say that you are adopting the zero trust, right? You need to balance how you are going to tackle, right, onto the security side, and in meanwhile you are just adopting that zero trust framework, or what Roozbeh say, it's a mindset. It's all about not only the identity but holistic cybersecurity as an organization is going through, right? It's either network or infrastructure or governance, or you are coming onto the identity part. Since we are talking about the regulated industry, a lot of audience wanted to discuss about the compliance and privacy side. The question is that once the governance or identity governance, once we are talking about, the perspective of the identity was different. Slowly, it's now going on to the cybersecurity side. that once you bring in the security as a prime and you are approaching for the identity security solutions, how you are going to balance between the need of the compliance with the agility required to adapt to emerging security challenges, right? Because if you are going to balance the security and then you are going to look at the data privacy and to the compliance, you may not fit all together in one bucket. If such kind of the scenario and situations, the leadership or the identity leadership it is facing into the regulated industry, how the first is that from the endpoint perspective, Roozbeh or Yash, how you guys deal with, and how you see Aubrey and Brent from the clients you are dealing with, and how do you advise? So anyone you can take up the questions.
So maybe I can start this one. As you said, there are two different views or angles when it comes to controls, compliance and cybersecurity. And in a very highly regulated environment, financial, healthcare, etc., we've seen over the years the condition where you're fully compliant, but a truck drives through your cybersecurity controls, right? And definitely not what we want. As you mentioned, IAM is a function of cybersecurity, and it is addressing cybersecurity needs. I think strategically building that understanding within the organization, within the executive leadership teams, as well as with technology leadership teams, to let them know of this condition that, yes, we can be fully compliant, and compliance is quite important. We've got to keep the business running, but we've left cybersecurity, essentially the door open on cybersecurity. So that building that understanding is quite important. And also, one observation is that the compliance needs of the organization are relatively static compared to the cybersecurity needs. The cybersecurity landscape changes quite a bit faster on a day-to-day, week-by-week basis versus compliance, where it is changing, but it doesn't move as fast. So I think keeping those two in mind, and also one other observation I have on this one is that in a highly regulated environment, compliance is the driver behind identity. It's been like that for businesses that have been around for some time. Changing that mindset, starting off by the fact that now we got to shift to cybersecurity, because identity starts off in that typical environment that business has been around for a long time and is highly regulated. Identity starts with your controls matrix, which remains relatively static. I think it needs to start off step before that. I think it needs to start off with your cybersecurity needs, mapping to your control matrix, and then to your processing activities. And what you will find is that your controls matrix becomes a subset of your cybersecurity needs. So focusing on your compliance, you'll miss a bigger picture.
Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well said.
Yeah, Brent, do you want to go? Do you want me to jump in? Okay. Yeah, I agree. Well said. I was going to add to that, right? There's this ever-present misalignment between technology and the speed of technology, which is always racing ahead, and then compliance and regulations, which are always lagging behind. That gap, at least in my experience, will never close, and it definitely leads to some challenges with for the teams, identity teams, cybersecurity teams that need to comply, that need to meet these regulations. And kind of my takeaway and sort of observation here is overall privacy. Some of this is very nuanced. Right? Take IP address, for example. Years ago, IP address is probably not something that you would lump into personally identifiable information. And today, there's some regulations, maybe GDPR, where IP address is. And in other parts of the world, and if you're a global business, it may not be, right? Your IP address in and of itself may not be enough to, trace directly back to who you are. It's like if I give you just the the numerical digits of my address, well, yeah, you may be able to track down to a finite number of people, but is that really, really me? And so we see that kind of nuance, right? It's the best example of this. I was talking with a colleague recently. It's kind of like, doing 60 to 55, right? You're technically speeding, right? You're technically breaking the law, but it's also very nuanced because kind of everybody's doing it, right? And this is where I think some of that misalignment it's gonna rear its head. I think some of the regulations, and if you guys kind of saw recently, Governor Newsom passed the California Delete Act, I believe it's called, well-intentioned, giving us the power, kind of one click to remove our information if we so choose from data brokers. And there's a whole nother set of pros and cons. We can have a whole entire webinar around data brokers and their value and their risks, the risk that they pose. But does that well-intentioned regulation mean that as a business, I no longer can use that data to deliver frictionless experiences or even to help mitigate fraud? And this is some of the, again, that conflict that I'm talking about that financial companies are faced with. Hey, I want to find the highest level of assurance to authenticate you, but am I being hammered by regulations with regard to biometrics and their use and storage and all of that? And so I think identity cybersecurity technologies they are evolving, right? They're evolving to address residency, sovereignty, orchestration to make visualizing these flows, these user journeys and flows easier to adapt to security. This is what Roozbeh talked about, that the landscape of cybersecurity is so quickly changing. You pour privacy on top of that, and it's a real challenge and struggle, never mind the cost of compliance, of dealing with these things, and sometimes these disparate regulations that don't align. So in one jurisdiction, you're complying with something, and in another, it's what might be perfectly okay. And this is that example. Again, this is the doing, this is doing 60 to 55, right, miles per hour, right, or whatever that is, that kind of analogy, right? You're technically breaking the law, right? But again, it's just sort of related and tied back to the misalignment that I mentioned. I really think transparency, is key for business in terms of how they're using data and how they're making or how they're trying to be compliant. I think that's probably the best practice because, again, more privacy laws, more cybersecurity regulations, the SEC just, added that on top of, the needs that companies need to deal with now. And so this is not going to be perfect and mistakes are going to be made, but I think limiting that in terms of that transparency, I think is key. I'll turn it to Brent for his thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is one of those areas that, is super challenging, and quite often, it's the regulation that's bringing forward the budget. It's how we're even, getting things done, and having some failures found on the regulatory side is how you continue to get budgeting and the attention. Certainly attacks are on everybody's mind, and not a matter of if but when. And I think that you have to have that balance in an organization. You have to strive for that balance between making sure that you're growing, the company is growing towards improving their posture there. So, I think everything else is well said, Aubrey. I think that some of the best intentions just, they just aren't making sense practically. So it takes a little bit of, I'll probably say the collaboration in an organization is one of the best things that you can do to make sure that you're dealing with things in a way that is the best for the organization, and and following the rules that are being laid out for you.
Yeah, I believe that it is going to be ongoing problem for the leadership into the regulated industry to manage that balance, right? They need to deal with the compliance, privacy, and ongoing regulations. There is no other choice because that is the prime. But in meanwhile, they have to deal with the cybersecurity threats, which is ongoing because they are dealing with. But the good part is that even the regulation and compliance are supporting to those cyber threats which are evolving day by day. And that is where you are seeing that a lot of regulations or the controls, either from the CISA or any of the regulated industries, right, or the organization who deal with, they're coming up with that. Coming on the very key points onto the automation side and user experience, because a lot of mid-size leadership and the engineering managers, since the landscape is evolving, and if you will see that opportunity of the automation within the identity security, and since you deal with day in, day out, what is your perspective, right? That considering that a lot of cyber threats are in, a lot of identity products comes with the configurations and a lot of out-of-box solutions. Within the financial industry, right, what are the significant opportunity for the automation in the identity security?
Yeah, it was a great question. When we talk about automation in identity programs or towards cyber threat and resiliency, we many times we follow the same principle of zero trust, least privilege, just-in-time access, some sort of AI, ML-based, risk-based access authentications. These are very great initiatives which can help in automating some of the credential-related, identity-related threats, automated revocations of credentials, and with the help of just-in-time access, we can significantly reduce the attack vector for any threat when it comes to the whole ecosystem of any cyber program. But I think the part where I would put more emphasis is on the creation of the credential towards the usage of the credential. It needs to be managed well. That's where we have seen people leaving the organization and the accounts are still existing in the system. Automation is great. They're finding those dormant accounts or any kind of accounts which are not longer being used. That's really the basic fundamental of, if it's not acquired, you need to make sure it's cleansed properly. Your hygiene is good around all the systems, and that's one of the places where people usually lack in automating those processes. It's very simple. You could put up any custom-based solution or out-of-the-box solution to make sure that those areas are taken care of, and that significantly reduce your risk exposure.
No, that's fair input. Roozbeh, what do you see from the automation perspective in identity security? Even almost all those leading products, right? Either you talk about SailPoint or the product suites from the Ping Identity and others. They are coming up with a lot of solutions, right? Which is in line with the business out of box. You just implement as is, reducing the overhead, right? But still, right, based on to use cases and the solutions, tailored solution, I will say that, which is required for your business need. What are the key area you would look to have the automation factor included?
Very good question. So I wholeheartedly agree with what Yash mentioned earlier, right? Just to build on that and to answer your question. I think one common pitfall when it comes to identity programs is that, and us identity professionals, I think, are culprit in propagating this problem around the world, is we start seeing ourselves as a technology function, whereas truly it's supposed to be a cybersecurity function. What I mean by that is we fall into this pitfall of automation. We build an automation hammer out of the identity program, and we look for nails for every well to hammer in. I think keeping that perspective in mind that we're in cybersecurity, we're not in automation, and this should not be an automation game. I think that's important. Missing that point has a couple of problems with it. One is, first of all, you get into nitty-gritty of technology implementation and maintenance. That creates tunnel vision. The other issue is we're all dealing with finite budgets and person powers and time in our calendars. If most of that time starts going toward, but the time and budget toward automation, we're start to miss other important things in our functions. I think a good use of technology and automation is going after, and I think Yash alluded to that earlier, is going after bulk operations to reduce the overhead and let the teams start focusing on other important things and not miss things. That's important. So going after bulk automation and bulk process automation, focusing on other important things. Also, and I think Sushil, you mentioned that, the right tool for your needs is very important, because the right tool, aside from the fact that, it has to be stable and secure, will come with the necessary out-of-the-box functionality for you, so you can configure it or use it. It's a turnkey product that can help you automate things without you and your team having to customize things and then maintain that customization over and over, year over year. So those are the key points to keep in mind when it comes to automation strategy.
Just one quick thought to jump on that, right? And we could ask our audience, right, who wants to read the manual, right, for anything these days, right? Nobody wants to read the manual. So, to your point, can we make it easier, like take away the customization, right? Reduce the level of coding, right? To do some of these, to support some of these integrations where identities, we've got to ship identity to all these different places as part of the cybersecurity strategy. And again, we got to, if we're spending time, reading a 1,000-page manual, nobody's going to want to do that. So, can we make it as easy as, dragging and dropping things? Nobody needs to read a manual to download something from the App Store to run a new app on their iPhone or Android. Like it's just easy, right? So that same kind of model in cybersecurity, identity orchestration, I think, is one way that we can reduce some of the complexity of customization. One way that we can reduce some of the long-term maintenance costs relative to, again, these integrations that we require to, again, deliver some type of cybersecurity outcome. So I just wanted to offer that quick thought up, to add on to the previous comments. So yeah, hopefully that, can be a way, a direction that we go in the future as one way, again, to automate more things and make it easier to maintain.
I got a thought.
Yeah, Brent, go ahead. That's what I was about to ask.
My thoughts about automation are, it reminds me of just thinking about, I'm in the woods and I'm chopping down trees and I'm busy because I've got a goal to make and I got to get these trees down. And someone comes up and says, well, you're using a dull saw. It really speed things up. So my point is you can't see the forest for the trees a lot of times. And so you might not have real good insights to what you think is automated and what really automation is also, right? And having someone else that can have that bigger, broader view can come in, because I'm running into folks using spreadsheets. It's manual process, but that's how their identity security program is being reviewed on a regular basis. So what you think might be automated might very well be very manual compared to the automation that's out there. And just look, things are not getting less complex. When we start looking at the numbers of identities, the numbers of applications, the numbers of permissions, and you start doing some simple math there, the complexity is growing and it's getting more difficult for humans to manage. So you need machines. We need machines. We need automation to help us simplify things. so that, it appears very, very simple, but there's a lot behind the scenes that are actually taking place. And I'm going to give you one specific example that we see quite often in the identity governance space, and that is something called certification fatigue. Someone that has a college degree is spending their career reviewing access for thousands of decisions. And it's just, that's living the dream, right? And it's not what they expected they would be doing. So bringing in AI, ML, tools like that can help you. Now, I would say that in this specific example, a lot of that's based around automation of roles and having roles become much more dynamic. But I think the next evolution beyond that is having policy, where policy can be very, very dynamic. Policy can drive that just-in-time access. Policy can drive that, well, they don't need that access right now, so let's not let them have it. That reduces the blast radius if their credentials do get compromised. And when we talked about those attacks earlier, the typical thing that's happened over the 30 years is that once somebody penetrates your network, lateral movement and finding new credentials they can exploit, or finding tokens where they can mint their own credentials so you aren't even seeing things happen, can happen. And so I think it takes that kind of bigger, broader perspective to really assess what automation could mean for you. And, and also along the other sides of that, where hopefully, it's turning up that quite often what I'm seeing is that not all identities are treated or created equal. Non-human identities are a big gap for most organizations. Supply chain, contractors, vendors, interns, all of those tend to not be automated, and there's manual processes behind how those are managed. But we tend to only talk about where the automation is on employees, right? Where they're in an HR system, an authoritative source system. But I think this other thinking around is important considerations around automation and what it could do for you.
Excellent insight, Brent. Thank you. Just a last question, and it was on my mind from long. I wanted to check. A lot of advancement, right? Every day, AI, ML into the product segment, or automation now we are talking about to the organization. But end of day, it's remains significant that if you will see the last 5 cybersecurity breaches, somewhere human error is the critical one, right? Aubrey was talking about, and you were talking about what happened into the hotel industry, right, recently. Social engineering, compromise, access, and all those, right? Roozbeh and Yash, right? How you guys enable, right, the human involvement or the people involvement around the identity security so that this human element related error can be minimized. It's a human, right? Error will happen. But that can be minimized, and these automations and the products, right, the best product which are available now, can help to enable better.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in there, and I'll make this statement. I think it's been said, even if not explicitly already, I think AI can be an enabler. It can help automation. It can help close gaps. It can help expedite things. The key thing is, at the end of the day, a human still needs to be involved, right? They still need to make the decision. And the AI can pull information like log data, but a human still needs to be involved in making that final evaluation. It's like, it's like automated cars, right? Or self-driving cars. They all require you to still keep your hands on the wheel or your eyes on the road. These cars have cameras and sensors that are tracking those things. So it's not like you get to just put self-drive on and go jump in the back seat, although we have seen some people do that at their own peril. Same thing with AI in this situation. And a really simple example is prompt bombing, right? Which is, rose earlier this year. And human frailty. We know how to make that go away by just, doing the facial recognition or touch and making that prompt, the MFA prompt, to go away. We can leverage risk signals in AI now to help that human make a better decision when faced with that. And that's a really simple illustration of how AI can help human make a better decision and reduce human error. I know we're running short of time, so I want to end it there and pass it on to whoever else to jump in.
Anyone from Roozbeh, any thought onto this? How you guys are doing?
Add a quick point. Great point, by the way, Aubrey. Thank you. I'll just give a quick example. I know we're short on time. The processes and the AI, ML, they're all designed based on the models. So some sort of machine learning, some sort of model which is going to be followed by. But those models sometimes have issues and make mistakes. This is why it's very important to have some sort of human in the loop to make sure that when the machine is making mistake, it's not continuously going and making a big disaster with that malfunction. We have seen it. I won't go into too much details, but a very well-defined automation process can be malfunctioned and end up identifying that now your C-suite executives cannot log in or they can't do what they're supposed to do, and it's just a recipe for bad days. So making sure that whatever automation and processes you have in place, there is a choke point somewhere in the process where you have some sort of kill switch. If things go sideways and some alerts start generating and some automated monitoring does kick in, and you have a human in the loop who is going to say, no, this is going out of the normal behavior, and we have to make sure it is stopped. So I'll just end it there.
Using last 2 minutes, any final thought?
One thing on this topic, I agree with both Aubrey and Yash on this one. I think identifying, having a thoughtful discussion around where is it that errors can happen, human errors, whether it's, a decision-making fatigue where the person just is tired of going through thousands of lines and just like rubber stamps, their certification. That's one example. The other example is in case of identity proofing. It's somebody who calls in and requests a password reset. Like identifying those gaps and closing them in a meaningful way, whether using automation with AI or, as Yash mentioned, having a human circuit break. I think that's an important piece, and also having a strategic, prioritized approach to it, to identify, to say, as an example, when it comes to privileged access management, we're always going to have a human circuit break to grant somebody access to our PAM platform, and putting the right level of education and training and awareness onto the operators of the tool to make sure that they don't fall for something like it, social engineering and handing over the keys to the kingdom, right?
Yeah, perfect. I just want to thank you, all of you. I know a few of the questions, but considering the time, probably we already touched all those questions, and I'll share with you to take the answer and I will pass to them. But really appreciate your time. Whatever your thoughts, ideas, and real experience you shared, that is definitely going to be helpful for all the audience and the attendees and whomsoever it will be shared. Looking forward for such discussions, taking some time out from the real works and sharing the experience, right? That how it works, what are the experience you want to share, and what are the good, bad, ugly, right? Within the identity, we are evolving. A lot of things has to be done. But really appreciate it. Thank you so much for all the attendees, and thank you so much for you panelists.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Great.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.